Right. So again, thank you for joining us for our Power Hour. We have a very packed agenda here for you. We're going to start off with just why are we talking about this, is all the challenges that the industry is facing. And then we'll get a little bit into some of the new SBOM minimum requirements that CISA has come out with. We'll walk through some of those. We'll walk through some real world examples of what it takes to actually get and use the SBOM in the real world. And then we'll touch on some of the other risky items that you'll find in software and how that relates to bill of materials. Okay. So software supply chain security, whether you're a software producer or a software buyer, there's one fundamental question that you kind of need to ask about the software. Is it safe, right? And all this work that we're doing about SBOMs and risk analysis, it's all to make sure that we can answer the question, is the software that I am releasing to my customers safe for them to install? Or if you're on the enterprise buyer side, how can I be sure that the software that someone has given to me is safe enough for me to deploy across my organization? And I minimize my risk that way. So the challenge that we have with the software supply chain is that anywhere in that pipeline can actually be attacked, right? We've been talking about SolarWinds and 3CX and the build compromise and how packages can be compromised within software development or software pipelines. But we've gone through a lot of new breaches this year. It started off with compromised developer tools with that VS Code. The extensions were compromised. So when people brought in their new updates, it brought in malicious software. And then last week, Andy, you want to talk a little about the craziness that's been going on the last 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, so if y'all have been paying attention, the NPM repo, which is one of the biggest, open source repos on the internet for Node, right? There's a very clever attack underway. Basically, the bad guys wrote an attack that they targeted a single package. That guy checks in code or checks in an update, and now the thing is worming throughout that repo. And so you're literally seeing something that I haven't seen for a very long time, which is self-replicating code across an entire ecosystem. It's super interesting. So does that help?
Yep, that's
cool.
Great.
And Chris, I see your hand.
Chris, if you can put your question or comment in the Q&A, that would be great.
Cool.
So onward, we're going to talk about the new minimum requirements. Actually, 2 sets came out recently. One on the CISA side, they put out a draft for public comment. So that's not the final. They're collecting responses from folks. And also the BIS TR on the other side of the pond from the German folks have put out some smaller updates to theirs. But in general, the difference between the two is that the EU version over here is much more prescriptive than the descriptions that you'll see in the CISA document. So if you like to be told exactly what people want to see, check out that other document. It'll give you some very specific guidelines. It'll also, help you comply with the CISA version. Okay. So I'm going to step through I think it's 11 fields that are required and just kind of highlight the bigger updates, right? So the big update here, they've changed the data field name to software producer, which is a pain. But really, the update here is about being more explicit about saying, hey, we do not know who the software producer is. So what we see a lot in SBOMs is just a lot of blank spaces around who the actual producer is. So what they're trying to do is encourage people to explicitly state, yep, this is one of our known unknowns. We don't know who that is. So that's the big update there. The next thing is when we're talking about component versions. So again, you can get a lot of variation on what a version actually is. The information can either be just not there, or sometimes the software developers put in like a range. So they would say something like, well, use anything that is version 5 or above. So that's just kind of vague. So what they're saying here is, in those cases, the person creating the SBOM can actually use the file creation date as a version date if they don't have some more information, right? Again, this is, trying to give more clarity on what you actually have in your software. Okay. So the next two things are new minimum elements. They were suggested in the last version, but they've been moved into the new one. I've read several comments about these, people kind of complaining that, oh, licenses aren't really a security risk, or the crypto hash, do we really need that? Is it really necessary? Our stance at ReversingLabs is that the component hash has been very valuable. It's particularly when people are trying to communicate and collaborate on remediation. There tends to be a lot of back and forth. Are we really looking at the same component? That all disappears if you have the component hash, because you'll know for sure, yep, we're looking at the same thing. It's there. And also about the licenses, I mean, most of your software component analysis solutions have been including license information anyway. So again, I don't, from our perspective, we don't see these things as something particularly to worry about. It's just about making sure that the solution that you're using either to create or consume can handle those two new fields, because the information will, for the most part, be there. Okay, so dependency relationship. Before, it just used to say things like, okay, make sure that you say things like software X is included in component Y, which is included in component A, and so on. But this new thing is about that they've added is to talk about derived from, and it's to highlight backported and forked software, which, Andy, can you explain exactly what that is?
Yeah, you bet. So so for example, if you're a Red Hat Enterprise Linux customer and somebody, looks at your website and it says, hey, you're running Apache, whatever, 2.0.0. And therefore you have this vulnerability, that vulnerability, that vulnerability. Well, if you're a Red Hat customer, they'll do what's called backporting. Well, they'll take the vulnerabilities in that release, in that 2.0.0 release, and they'll crank out a fix, basically a patch or what they call backporting, so that, yeah, it reports as 2.0.0, but it's immune to those vulnerabilities. One of the reasons for doing that is because then you get better probes, right? If you're under attack and your attackers think you're running this vulnerable version of Apache when you're not, then you get much better forensics about the attack itself, right? And they, of course, get frustrated, which we all want. So hopefully that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. It's just
Okay.
more than I knew. Okay, so the last two new things they've added is the tool name, which, so for us, if we are generating an SBOM, it will be SpectraSure from ReversingLabs. And the other thing is they want you to specify where in the software life cycle that the SBOM has been created. And I want to stop a little bit and talk about that, because there can be very large differences between what is in your SBOM depending on where you've actually created it. So if you're using, for instance, a software composition analysis solution, they go in and it's really early in the life cycle. They'll look at the the manifests, which is actually how the developer has specified what the software should have in it, right? That could be missing all sorts of sub dependencies. So it's a first look, but it's not like a very complete SBOM. The other thing you can be doing is, well, as your CI/CD tools are building the solution, you could be documenting like what's going into that build, right? So that's what's called software as it's built, okay? And the third space that you can actually create an SBOM is right at the package level, the thing that you're actually going to deliver. And why that's different is because at this point, what people are bringing in, that release process, you're bringing in all sorts of other artifacts, which aren't necessarily something that your developer has created right now, but still are executable, right? Like the things that are actually going to install the software. Andy, do you have any other examples of things that can kind of get pulled in?
Yeah, so I supported a lot of software teams, usually on the far right there in the after build. So to the left of that, there's a release manager involved, and if their automated checks come up all green, then they'll release. If they don't, if there's anything that's not quite right, then there's going to be a conversation. And I have worked with teams where the conversation is, oh yeah, hey, that failed, but Bill, what you need to do here, let me give this to you, pull it into the release and we're good, right? And so what's that do if your SBOM has been taken off to the left? Your SBOM is wrong. and there may be other problems involving things like signatures, right? So it seems like it's kind of whatever, somebody says I need to capture where in the process the bomb was created. Kind of seems like overkill until you understand what developer teams actually do and until you understand what the bad guys do, right? When you look at SolarWinds and 3CX both, they're in the pipeline undetected. And so if your SBOM or your detective controls take place anywhere to the left of packaging, you don't have insight into what's going on in your pipeline, right? And so that can be another interesting use case for the reason to care about this sudden new field in SBOMs. So hopefully that makes sense. Y'all, I'm monitoring the chat and I'm monitoring the Q&A. So if something comes up, that'll be great. Also, forgot to tell you guys, I'm out here in Western Arkansas where bandwidth is optional. So if I disappear, you guys know what happened. So
Let's hope that doesn't happen. And I guess the other interesting thing is that after build, I mean, that's the binary, the package that the customers are getting or receiving. So a lot of our solutions are actually focused on helping people understand just, okay, I got this huge VM from someone and I need to deploy it, but I want to make sure it's within our tolerance range first, right? I want to make sure that whatever is in there, we would consider it safe enough to deploy. And also we want to have a record of all the components, right? Because if anything becomes vulnerable in the future, then it's literally a database lookup for us to determine what our level of risk is based on that new information, instead of going and pestering every single vendor that you get software from. That could be in the thousands, right? So that's why that software as distributed, that binary analysis becomes important there. Okay. So we have another polling question, Joanna, if you can get that up for folks. We wanted to just get a sense of where people think that their SBOM generation is actually occurring today.
And while it pulls up, we should have included a question that said, golly, I wish I could generate my own SBOM because my vendors aren't giving me one. But when when we put together, we're planning for this webinar, one of the things that I've encountered back before I came over into marketing was a large financial services customer that felt like they swung a pretty big stick, right? They 7 figures to spend. I want my SBOM. And the response was, you ain't getting one. And it was very politely stated, but for those guys, like Jasmine said, it was, hey, if we've got the binary, which is what you're going to deploy, and we've got the tools that'll generate the SBOM out of that deployable binary, your vendor can tell you no all day long. You've still got the SBOM, you've still got the inventory that you needed, and now you know that you've got an ornery vendor. So anyway.
Okay. So speaking about that, so let's get talking about going from this static requirements document to something that's a little bit more strategic. I wanted to share some of our own customers' experience. So when we went out and pulled them earlier this year, several folks were saying, listen, less than half of the vendors that we asking for an SBOM could actually deliver one. And we weren't very happy with the results that we were getting. We thought they were unactionable because there was just, when they say lack of depth or context, it meant that there were just a lot of blank spaces within the data that they were getting. And they couldn't tell, again, whether this was because they just didn't know or they were trying to hide the information or what. So that's one of the reasons the change is being suggested. And a lot of them said, listen, this isn't actually what we're going to deploy, because if we looked at the size of all the components that are listed here, it's like half the size of the thing that they actually gave us. So what's in the rest of it? And what they meant by non-compliant and failing to meet standards, which was actually how the SBOMs were actually being delivered, right? They were getting some spreadsheets, they were getting Word docs. Our favorite is, hey, they were displaying them on a Zoom call. Yeah, that's not something I can, audit and make our regulators happy that we are compliant with these regulations that we have to do, right? So that's the real world that we're kind of living in. And the other thing is we found that you only get half the story there, right? You know what's in it, but it doesn't, if you only have an inventory list, you don't have a sense of what the actual risks of each of those components are, right? So those are the challenges, at least our customers who've been trying to get SBOMs from their vendors have been running into.
Okay. And we've got a question from Ben in the Q&A. How closely do SBOMs provided by a vendor match an analyzed SBOM generated from the delivered binary? I know the engineering answer is it depends. So Ben, the answer is it's tool dependent. You're right, it depends, but it depends on the capabilities of your tool. I think we pride ourselves in a complete SBOM, including dependencies. And a little later in this, Jasmine's going to talk about the difference between the manifest file, which is supposed to be the list of components, which most tools will hinge on, and the ability to actually rip it apart and go, yeah, this thing's not in the manifest, and list that out and make it part of that bill of materials. So hope that answers your question. Information available during SBOM creation. So Kurt, absolutely, that's why you want to do it all the way out to the right. We're not creating anything else. We're going to take that thing that we are either ready to release to our customers if we're building it, or we're getting ready to put the, the server or the desktop guys to work installing it, it ain't changing from that point. They're getting ready to go live with it. And so if you can analyze it at that point, you've got the SBOM of what you're getting ready to release or what you're getting ready to install as built, not as imagined by a manifest file. So I hope that makes sense. Was that clear there, Jasmine? Does that make sense? I
It makes
miss
sense to
anything?
me.
All right.
So here's like a real world example, right? This is an actual package that was part of a large breach scenario. And you can see here, what we were doing is we looked at the manifest that was actually kind of included with that SBOM, and we, tell them, okay, these are the items that were listed, right? So that's what this sorting was. And there were, 127 items that were actually declared by the manifest that was included. But
So
go ahead, Andy.
sorry, Jasmine. Yeah. So Kurt, there you have it, right? We're looking at an MSI. You can see right there package dependencies listed. So your point is well taken. Hey, if all we're looking at is an individual executable, you're quite right. You're gonna have to fish out those runtime dependencies. When you're looking at the package that you're gonna install, it's gonna call that stuff out, and we'll see that. So hopefully that helps you there, Kurt. Sorry, Jasmine. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. But the other interesting thing about this software package is literally there were no CVEs in any of the components declared by the manifest. This vendor took, remediation pretty seriously, at least for the things that were declared, right? The problem was the thing that got compromised, the malware that got embedded, was in something that wasn't in the manifest. It wasn't like an open source component, because quite frankly, what got compromised was their actual build environment. So this is why when you listen to us, we will say, just depending on one, the SBOM by itself, and two, just what's in the manifest, you can just get this false sense of security. Right? You have to be a little bit more suspicious to survive in this world where we're getting attacked all of the time, at least in our opinion. Okay. So in terms of the things that you should be looking for, again, comprehensive, we want to make sure that you have full visibility across, the entire package and full visibility into the risks. The other thing about the SBOM or any of the risk information that there should be shareable, right? And shareable so that if you are the enterprise buyer and your IT team has done their binary analysis and said, look, we're finding things that are not jiving with our risk tolerance. The ability to share that back directly with the vendor, so you're both on this, have that same source of truth about what's in that application is very powerful. Okay. And then of course, ideally you would have some insights and clear next steps on like what to do next. So those design concepts are part of how we went about designing our version of shareable reports. Andy, you want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so again, what's an SBOM? An SBOM is a list of ingredients. Hey, that's great. Does that tell me the risk? No, it does not, unless I cross-reference for vulnerabilities. So, and even that's only vulnerability risk. The thing that has been going on with NPM all week with this cascading backdoored libraries up there on NPM, hey, they ain't a CVE for that. Right? So that's a risk that involves actual malware in the bundle that if you can't catch that backdoor dependency when you're doing your NPM build, you're in trouble. If you do catch it, then you kind of want to be able to share, and you want to be able to share in a meaningful way. Hey, gang, nobody's perfect, but these are the issues that violate my risk tolerance, right? And go with that so that everybody's crystal clear. What needs fixed? Well, this is the stuff that's red, meaning this needs to get done. If you're an ambitious vendor, you look at the stuff in yellow too and go, hey, why not? Why not look good for our customers, right? But you start where there's a violation of the customer's risk tolerance if it's shareable. And obviously we're talking about it because with an SBOM, yeah, you can email that thing, you can share that. It's a little tricky to email a 60 meg SBOM, trickier to email a 160 meg SBOM, but you can do it, you can share it. Or you could have what's behind door number 2, click a button, put in their email address, share it, say that it's available to them for 60 days and get on with your business. So hopefully that covered it. And I think there's a question about lock files and manifest files. So it depends on what's doing your build, right? And is there a way to ignore the log file? And I think you'll find that in a variety of build environments, there is just a way to flat out ignore whatever it is that it's supposed to be taking directions from. So confidential, that's my public answer. And then Steve, here's the catch. Do you want your customers to have a finding with one of the libraries you provided or on-prem software and you don't see it? Steve, I don't understand your question, so I'm gonna ask you to kind of clarify that, and I'll easy for me to say. I'll eyeball it a little bit more here, but if you can clarify, I'd appreciate it. So, sorry, Jasmine.
Nope, that's fine. So again, along the lines of sharing, particularly once you've gotten those SBOMs in either Cyclone DX or SPDF format, those are the only two that CSIS is serious about having as data standards. You want to make sure that it can seamlessly integrate with whatever IT service management tool or SBOM management tool that you have, right? So for us, we have an integration with ServiceNow. You can take a look at that if you like. But I want to move on and talk about these other risky items that are in software, because with everyone so focused on the software components, there are other things that add risk to your business that live in the software that aren't necessarily a component, right? There could be embedded AI. So the AI can be, a big fat file that they've put in the software that may or may not show up as a component in your SBOM, depending on how people are doing it. Or it can actually be a service that reaches out, that it gets called from your software, right? And those services, whether it's an AI service or any other type of cloud service, those can be insecure. They may not require authentication, or the authentication is very weak, or you didn't realize that it was actually bi-directional information that you're sharing, that sort of thing. And other thing is just weak cryptography, right? Are those secrets hackable or not? And we'll get a little bit into each of those. So that's why, from our perspective, we should be thinking about going beyond just an SBOM to having bills of materials for those 3 items as well. And we say, well, it's X because it can be software, it could be services, it can be crypto, that sort of thing. So let's take a quick look at each of those 3 things, right? So the AIBOM, or machine learning bomb. So that would be an inventory of all the actual AI components that are embedded in the software, that come with the software. And why this is becoming an issue, in our opinion, is that the majority of software vendors are saying that they're prioritizing the integration of AI into their applications. So it's coming whether we like it or not. Andy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think go ahead, just say co-pilot. All done. A wonderful surprise. Hey, you're helping me. Thank you. Didn't know it was coming though. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
Right. So again, when people talk about AI or ML bomb, what they're talking about is a model that someone has either built themselves or downloaded off of Hugging Face or the like, and actually embedded it in the software package that you're getting, right? So the information you like to see is what are the data sets, you know, where is it exactly in the software? And I know for Cyclone DX, they've listed those things out underneath a component type called machine learning model. So that's where that information will exist. But with those AI actual models comes a new type of risk, right? So Andy, you want to talk about pickle files? Why they're so uniquely dangerous?
Uniquely dangerous. Yeah. So once upon a time, there was an LLM that was available up on Hugging Face that opened a reverse engineer or a reverse shell upon ingest. So what could go wrong, right? You want your machine to be able to speak Hungarian or read OCR or whatever you wanted it to do, and you pulled in this library. Guess what? Guess what's going to get learned? Whatever the team on the other end of that reverse shell wants it to learn. That's what's going to happen. Oh, by the way, it also included a downloader and networking capabilities and execution capabilities. So yeah, it's opening a reverse shell. Golly, that's sad. But what do you think is coming next? Maybe a stage 2. So, and you know what Jasmine's got up right now, this is a fairly tiny file. But when you want to scope the problem, if you think about it, when you look at some of the stuff that's available on Hugging Face, we've got a sample teed up. It's a 35 gig standalone library. What do you got that's going to look at that? And that's one of the reasons why, you know, with ReversingLabs, with the binary analysis capability, 35 gig, yeah, we're going to look at it. Does it stand up a reverse shell? No, it does not. So, you know, when we start to talk about AI included, like Jasmine said, there's a couple of delivery models, right? Call outs to services, some of which are prohibited, or embedded AI or you know, machine learning models. Both of them can be dangerous, right? And so it's, you know, if you can't see it, you can't protect it. And Steve, thank you for clarifying your question. It looks like you're making the same point we're making here, which is that if you're a software provider and your customer figures out that you don't know what's in your bundle, even though you provided an SBOM, now you've lost trust with the customer. And in some cases, told you guys my background was IT ops. I used to hammer my vendors, right? And I'd work with my general counsel's office so that, man, if they sneezed wrong, they're in breach. And I got them where I want them. And so this is another example like that. Hey, in my contract, assuming I'm doing maybe some enterprise contracts, if you guys provide an SBOM that's inaccurate, you're in breach, and that escalates to a whole different level of conversation. Renewal, auto renewal? I don't think so. Nice try, guys. Same price as last year? Nice try. Not doing it, right? So Steve, so thanks for taking the time to clarify that. So there you go.
All right, so let's talk about those services, right? So Andy said several times that you can have AI as a service. So what does that actually mean? It means that, you know, you have your software sitting here, a little binary that's going to be running. But what it's actually doing is it's reaching out and it's talking to other systems, other services. And as we saw with that Salesforce mess that happened a couple weeks ago, you need to really understand what that software is talking to, right? Because some of it can be pretty important, right? Your financial services, chat services, user identity, all of these things could be delivered by third-party external services, external to the software that you have deployed in your organization. And that's why what we're trying to do, at least at this beginning stage, because we are at the beginning, is at least give people a sense of how many services are actually being used in the within this piece of software. How many endpoints within a particular service, right? So, and actually what those endpoints actually are, right? Is the data flow bidirectional? Is it only, you know, inbound? Is it only outbound? Can you, what authentication is required for this, right? And do you want to?
Yeah, so a lot of times people refer to the SaaSBOM as the stuttering bomb, right? So it's a SaaS, the SaaSBOM. Sorry, I just had to get that in there. But we did have a customer that out of nowhere comes an edict, thou shalt not TikTok, thou shalt not have anything like TikTok anywhere near our environment. I don't care if our firewall's got compensating controls. I don't care. You're going to find what it is that wants to phone home to TikTok, right? And so when we start to think about that client-side SaaSBOM, that's a use case that comes up from time to time where it's like, don't care about compensating controls. Compensating controls fail. And by the way, I've got an assurance from my vendor that they abide by everything I got to abide by. So if I find that call out to TikTok or something else equally heinous in the eyes of whoever it is they got to answer to, again, you're in a place where, hey guys, you ain't doing what you said you were going to do. And so again, just like everything else, if you can't see it, it's harder to protect it. And as far as I know, clairvoyance isn't in anybody's job description, and it's a roadmap item for everybody's AI. So
Great.
I beat that dead horse to death.
The other thing to think about when you're thinking about these services is that what's protecting the authentication is a secret, right? And those secrets, we're getting to a point where quantum computing is going to make, you know, secrets not secret anymore. Right? We've already been tracking attacks where what the breach does is just go and collect vast amounts of encrypted information. And this is making particularly financial services organizations very nervous, right? Because that data has a very long shelf life. So if the secrets, the encryption that's used to keep that data secure can be broken in a year or 2 years or 5 years from now, it's very concerning to them. And that's really what that's when if you hear the term quantum migration planning, or you hear about cryptographic assets that need to be examined, that's what they're talking about. It's determining what secrets are, what type of secrets do you have? What is the technology that's like generating those things? And is it going to be resistant to this new type of quantum computing attack, right? Now, there was a survey done recently, and this is kind of disturbing, because they were saying, hey, what's the state of, quantum planning, and, whether what secrets are in your organization as a whole, far less just your software. And very few people to date, at least the enterprises that have active plans, have actually completed the inventory of just even certificates, and even fewer have the actual assessment of whether those systems are vulnerable or not. Like I said, we're at the very beginning of this. So we believe strongly that the CBOM of the software is a very important aspect of this kind of planning that needs to actually happen, because there are public key encryptions, there are all sorts of certificates, there are hash functions that are used over and over again within the software. So if while you're also generating your SBOMs, having that scan also spit out, hey, here's a list of the quantum computing assets there in the software, and it's delivered in a way that you can share that with that larger planning team, that's all to the good, right? So at the moment, this is a very simple set of information that we're trying to deliver, right? Like what kind of asset it is, the type of algorithms used, what the hash function actually does. Now, that's important when people are trying to figure out, well, okay, what secret is this protecting? That's information they're going to need. And then, quite frankly, what software components are actually depending on this particular secret, right? So that's the type of information you should start thinking about. And again, like I said, shareable, right? So use a Cyclone DX kind of standard format for supplying software information, so that you can share it with whatever tools are being used to create those larger inventories of all the cryptographic assets that are being used, in systems, on networks, for identity. I mean, it's a massive enterprise project, which is why I think, for the most part, the people that have gotten started early are in government, are in financial services, are in insurance, right? So what we're going to keep an eye out on are the best practices that these organizations learn. So when the next round of industries are ready to take this challenge on, we'll have those practices in place. We can share those. Andy, any other?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay.
So we've done this dance before, gang, where cryptography becomes obsolete. What you need to understand is that right now there are bad guys, including nation states, that are snarfing up stuff that they can't decrypt right now, and they're setting it aside. And once they've got the capability, they're going to go back through it and put it to work. So, this is like everything else, right? There's risk. What do we do with risk? We prioritize, and then we triage and act against it. But it starts with knowing that it's there, that there's a problem. So there, I'm off my soapbox for that.
Okay. So not going to spend too long on these. This is just saying that, yes, we have multiple bills of materials. One scan will produce all of these plus the risks. And we'll also do things like how to tell you which safe level you're at, based on all the information that we find. And we try to make that shareable as many ways as possible. So within our portal, you can give people access to the portal and you can see it there. You can literally create a PDF of like the summary page and send that off to your executives so that they can do their board presentations, and you don't have to think about it anymore. Or people who have these archive requirements, we can archive every single report that we generate for either a particular piece of software or whatever groups of software that we're doing, timestamped so that you know what date it is. And we actually include things like, well, this is the version of the threat hunting engine that we were using at the time. So if someone comes up and says, hey, how come you couldn't find this piece of malware a year ago? And it's like, yeah, there wasn't a signature at that time. See, look. So that's the sort of thing we're doing there. So in terms of considerations, again, they're just 4 simple things. Just remember that anywhere along the pipeline can be attacked. So you need visibility that can help you at any of those stages. Those threats can be in any component or any file even, right? We've seen malware stuck in image files, for instance. So it's not just, oh, we're only going to worry about our open source. Okay. The most comprehensive SBOM, at least in our opinion, is the software as delivered. And if in that generation process, you can also get inventories about these other items that are not software components, that's all the better, right? So before I leave, just wanted to flash up some other resources that we have for you on this topic. You know, if you actually download the PowerPoint or the PDF that we're going to send you to, the links will actually be included, so they'll be clickable. And Andy and I are actually going to be doing another demo show next week for software producers. So if you want to just have an easy way to like just understand what our solution actually really does and see how people use it, we have 2 versions of demos coming up. So be there or be square.
All right, and we got a question from Nana. So, is it Nana? Was it your question? Was it about the medical devices, or have you got another question? And I apologize. I don't know what to do other than to tell you, hey, can you come off mute? And I don't know if the answer is yes or no.
I don't think we can put people on voiceover.
I think you're on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Thanks,
Yeah.
Joanna.
Yeah, so I am very particular about SBOM because I've worked with medical devices doing risk analysis and trying to make sure that these devices are not compromised before they join the network. So we were trying to think about the AIBOM, where people think that maybe artificial intelligence is going to help us quicken, or let me say facilitate our processes or procedures or production. But one thing I want to find out from RL is, can your scans dictate any hidden, let me say, vulnerabilities in an AI-enabled device? Should it be scanned before we connect it to the network? What are going to be the kind of security that we have to build before we join these devices? I'm much particular about the AI aspect. And for the SBOM, like you said, sometimes the Cyclone DX and the SPDS files, you scan them and I think they get, once if they are being transferred from a vendor or from one point to the other, they get compromised with some kind of thing. So sometimes scans has to be done 2-3 times before you get the actual, or let me say the legitimate kind of results that you want to know when it comes to your CV levels or threshold. So I want to know if the AIBOM, your let me say tool, is able to detect to a certain level of residual risk where we can accept that yes, this is the risk that we know on this device, and therefore we can harden our end of the network just to protect these devices once they connect to the network. Thank you.
Okay. Well, they're probably not giving you the source code, right? And they're not, if it's a IoT device or a medical device, you probably don't have that software to scan, and we would need that. Where we can come into play, if you think about, if you're familiar with the Purdue model, right? There's the stuff that's kind of IoT and firmware, and then moving up the layers, there's the stuff that controls those components. So we can help you usually with the control side, but because you're not usually getting the actual firmware, based on what you outlined, my recommendation would be to look at something like a Qualys, something like that, that'll, you know, explore for vulnerable surfaces on that network, which is a whole different ball game than, hey, what's inside of it? You got to tickle it just right from the outside to understand if there's AI, and depending on your tool, you may not be able to do that. Whereas if you're actually looking at the guts and you're pulling it apart, you've got a freaking inventory. There's no mystery. So hope that makes sense. Did I miss anything there, Jasmine?
Hey, you're the technical expert.
Oh no. Oh, heaven help us. We're in trouble. All right.
Check it out and see it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Okay, anything else? Because we're coming up on the hour, so we've held you captive long enough, I think. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time. If you didn't get to your questions, we will follow up with you later. So have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.